If we are seeing signs of some movement which might lead to a political process, then that must be a good thing. But it's a good thing as long as it follows certain requirements. One requirement, which has been made very clear by the government of Afghanistan, but also by key international partners like the United States, is that this has to be an Afghan-led process. And I'm confident that it will be an Afghan-led process because, frankly, a peace process which was led by foreigners, whoever they might be, would simply not deliver the sort of peace which Afghanistan needs. It has to be Afghan to Afghan.
Opposition leaders in Afghanistan have come out recently and said, what are we doing? We shouldn't be talking with the Taliban at all. You know, the Taliban are only really talking about talks as a way to sort of sweeten the US in the run-up to sort of 2014.
Well, I think what we have to do is test the insurgents to see whether they are serious about viable peace talks. If they are, then that is consistent with what the government of Afghanistan and indeed all parties of Afghanistan have been saying for a long time. But as I said, it has to be a process which has the necessary safeguards in it so that all of the communities in Afghanistan can feel confident that their rights and their values will be respected in whatever deal may be eventually reached. But we're still quite a long way from that. First, we have to find out whether there is a viable peace process to be followed.
In the press in the last couple of weeks, it's clear that there are some tensions between the palace and the US, the international community. President Karzai is consistently asking for night raids to stop. The issue with the Bagram prison being handed over, for him calling for it to be handed over to Afghan control in a month's time, I think that took the Americans by surprise. What should we read into this?
I think it's really important that we keep this in perspective. You know, when you're the president of a sovereign country, an independent and a proud country, and yet you have on your territory, under a UN Security Council resolution, over 100,000 foreign troops, there are bound to be difficulties and problems which have to be resolved. And that isn't surprising. We shouldn't be astonished that there are sometimes disagreements amongst friends. We need to work on those privately and find solutions which satisfy the Afghan government but also allow us to continue the campaign, which is such a strong part of the partnership we have.
What would you say, words of reassurance to the Afghans, that we're not just going to abandon them?
Well, look, we've made very clear that we will have a long-term partnership with Afghanistan after 2014. I do think that amongst the commentators on Afghanistan, some of them have gone a little bit too far in painting gloomy scenarios for Afghanistan. You know, there's been a lot of achievement over the last 10 years. And now Afghanistan is unlikely to turn into a perfect state after 2014. It's going to be a long journey for Afghanistan with its partners in the years thereafter. But, you know, when you think about the mineral wealth which Afghanistan has and which will increasingly be exploited in future years, when you think about the way in which so many more Afghans now are living a life which is much closer to normality than it has been at almost any time in the last 30 years, I think there are good causes for optimism. I certainly don't agree with those people who predict that Afghanistan will sink into civil war as it has done in the past.
Looking ahead towards the Chicago summit, how much of significance should we put on that?
Well, I think Chicago will be an important point for us because I think that it will give us more definition about the relationship between NATO and Afghanistan beyond 2014. And I hope that we will be able to achieve greater clarity on, for example, what the Afghan government would like NATO to do in Afghanistan after transition is finished, whether it's in the role of training and mentoring the Afghan security forces or whatever other functions NATO can assist Afghanistan with. I think it will also address issues like how the international community will help to financially support the Afghan security forces in future years. That's not simply a NATO responsibility, that's a responsibility for the whole international community. But I hope that at Chicago we will get some clarity on these questions.
And with the Chicago summit in mind then, what do you think needs to have been achieved by then, sort of 6 months' time?
Well, I think that we need to continue with transition. We need to continue with the training of the Afghan security forces and I'd just like to make a point on this, because with the Afghan security forces, what we're seeing is not only increasing numbers of army and police, but we are genuinely seeing greater capability. You know, I've been looking in the last few days at the way in which Afghan security forces are increasingly not only taking part in operations, but are actually leading conventional operations in Afghanistan. That is really growing at quite an impressive rate, and that's because the capability is improving. So we have to continue our work on that subject. That's very important. Of course, we need to continue, as I've said, to help Afghanistan and support Afghanistan in improvements in the areas of the economy and governance. And you mentioned the peace process. It will be very interesting to see whether during 2012 we begin to see the start of a viable peace process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.